Trapped, the sky darkened quickly, and the first raindrops splattered against Sarah's windshield as she drove deeper into the forest. She'd been told this road led to a shortcut, but as the path narrowed and the trees closed in, she started to regret her decision. The GPS had lost signal miles ago, leaving her to navigate the twisting, unfamiliar roads on instinct alone. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the low growl reverberating through the air. The rain intensified, turning the dirt road into a slick, treacherous path. As Sarah rounded a sharp corner, her tires slid in the mud, and she struggled to regain control of the car. It fishtailed, and with a sickening jolt, it slammed into something hard. The engine sputtered and died. Sarah sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands, her heart pounding in her chest. The rain was now pouring down in sheets, making it difficult to see anything beyond the hood of her car. She tried the ignition, but the engine refused to start. Realizing she had no choice, Sarah grabbed her phone, but as expected, there was still no signal. She looked around, trying to gauge her surroundings, but all she could see were endless rows of trees, their branches swaying menacingly in the storm. She couldn't stay in the car all night, not with the temperature dropping and no help on the way. She took a deep breath and grabbed the flashlight from her glove compartment, pulling her jacket tightly around her before stepping out into the storm. The rain was icy, and it soaked through her clothes almost immediately. Shivering, Sarah aimed the flashlight round, trying to find any sign of civilization, a house, a cabin, anything that could offer shelter. The beam of light caught something in the distance, a faint, flickering glow. Hope surged within her as she began to trudge through the mud toward it. The walk was harder than she expected, the ground was uneven, and roots seemed to reach out to trip her with every step. But the thought of finding shelter kept her moving. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally reached the source of the light. It was a small cabin, nestled deep within the trees. The windows were dark, but a lantern hung on the porch, swaying gently in the wind. She hesitated for a moment. Something about the place made her uneasy, but with the storm growing fiercer and no other options, she climbed the steps and knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time, but still, there was no response. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain battered the cabin's walls. Desperate for warmth and safety, Sarah tried the door handle. It turned easily in her hand, and the door creaked open.
Inside, the cabin was dark and silent, but at least it was dry. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air was musty, filled with the scent of damp wood and something else she couldn't quite place. She shone her flashlight around the room, revealing simple furnishings: a worn sofa, a small table, and a fireplace with a stack of logs beside it. Relieved, Sarah set to work building a fire. It took some time, but eventually, the flames caught, casting a warm glow that pushed back the shadows. She sank onto the sofa, exhausted, and pulled her phone out again. Still no signal. She would have to wait out the storm and try to find help in the morning. As she sat there, listening to the crackle of the fire and the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof, she became aware of just how quiet it was inside the cabin. Too quiet. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, and she found herself glancing over her shoulder at the dark corners of the room. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked overhead. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her ears. She hadn't noticed any stairs or a loft when she came in, but the sound was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was moving above her. She grabbed the flashlight and shone it at the ceiling, but all she saw were wooden beams. Another creak, followed by a soft thump, as if something heavy had been dropped on the floor above. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She slowly stood up, unsure of what to do. Part of her wanted to flee the cabin, run back into the storm, but the other part knew that whatever was up there, she had to confront it. She found a rickety staircase hidden behind a door near the fireplace, leading up to what seemed to be an attic. The steps groaned under her weight as she ascended, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. At the top, she found a small door, slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. The attic was cold and dark, with only the barest hint of moonlight seeping through a small, cracked window. The space was cluttered with old furniture covered in dusty sheets, boxes piled haphazardly, and the remains of what looked like an old rocking chair, shattered into pieces on the floor. But it wasn't the mess that caught her attention, it was the feeling of being watched. Her flashlight flickered, and for a split second, she saw something in the shadows, a figure standing in the corner, eyes glinting in the dark. She gasped and dropped the light, plunging the room into total darkness. In the silence that followed, she heard a soft whisper, so faint she could barely make it out. "Why did you come here?" Sarah fumbled to pick up the flashlight, her hands shaking uncontrollably. When she finally managed to switch it back on, the figure was gone, but the oppressive feeling remained. She backed out of the attic, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She had to get out of there. But as she descended the stairs, the cabin seemed to change around her. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. The fire she had lit was out, and the room was plunged into darkness again. She tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as she pulled at it, banging her fists against the wood, but it was like the cabin itself was holding her in place. Then she heard it again, the whisper, closer this time. "You can't leave." Sarah spun around, shining her flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. She was trapped, alone in the darkness, with whatever was haunting this place. Desperation gripped her as she tried to think of a way out, but all she could hear was the relentless whisper, echoing in her mind, growing louder and louder until it was a deafening roar. "You can't leave!" She screamed, and the flashlight went out. They found Sarah's car 2 days later, abandoned on the road, but there was no sign of her. The search party scoured the forest, calling her name, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. The cabin, if it had ever existed, was never found.